Welcome into the OBR post-game show as the Browns fall today to the New Orleans Saints 35-14 in a disappointing outcome. The man next to me is the one and only, always fantastic Pete Smith. Follow him on Twitter at _Pete Smith _. Pete, this game is tough to swallow. You know, the run game was efficient. Your quarterback threw for 395 yards, no turnovers. You limited your penalties. And yet you still only scored 14 points and lost going away in the fourth quarter. So, where do you come out on this as how you feel about it? Because there were some good things in there, and certainly the defense didn't play great, but you, at the same time, felt like you should have had more points on the scoreboard.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how mad you want me to get at Dustin Hopkins because I don't care. I mean, field goal kicking, like whatever. Defense, frustrating to watch at times. It felt like they just did not do a good job accounting for Taysom Hill. And didn't tackle particularly well. And then their pass rush was just not effective. They weren't able to get consistent pressure on Derek Carr, and the few times they did, it got results. But like ultimately, they crushed him with the screen game. When he was able to, extend, he was able to find open guys. I think Clint Kubiak had a lot of answers for what you would say is a stereotypical Jim Schwartz game plan. So that part of it's frustrating. The Myles Garrett element is frustrating because, one, he's playing through a lot of pain and was blocked by 2 and 3 guys, and you didn't get enough from everybody else. I saw flashes from guys. I continue to love what I see from Isaiah McGuire. Okoronkwo had the strip sack that unfortunately bounced right back to the quarterback. But overall, just not much there. But even as I say this, and I'm going to say the offense should have scored more points and all these other things, I had a lot of fun watching the offense. Like, it was genuinely fun. And it is frustrating. The part of this is because the offense has been so miserable this year that I genuinely had fun watching the Browns running up and down the field. And I wish they would have been able to do more with it. The running game still stunk. They struggled. Offensive line had a hard time at points. The 4th and 1 play was particularly dispiriting. Ethan Posick got drilled into the backfield and they got knocked backward. Overall, the run game wasn't good, and the Saints came in with a very specific game plan. You are not going to beat us on the ground. Jameis Winston's going to have to beat us through the air. And you got a ton of big plays from Jameis Winston. As I said, it was fun. And I'm going to make this point. Jameis Winston is giving you everything Joe Flacco did, and Joe Flacco is turned into, like, whatever you want to say at this point. The common denominator here is go play for Kevin Stefanski. He'll make you put up big numbers, and it is. And what makes this part interesting to me is, and you wrote about this, what we want to see what Ken Dorsey can do to sort of validate his presence here. And and you could still sit here and go 14 points, and we have to sort of incorporate the 2 missed field goals in that, whatever. But, like, you can see what they want to do, and you can see that it's fun. You can see that it works, and you can see that it fits the personnel we had here. I did not see wide receivers who looked too slow to run this offense. I did not watch wide receivers who couldn't get open in this offense. And even as I'm watching Jameis Winston throw 30 for 46 for 395, you're coming out of this game and you're going, there were still more plays he could have made. And that, to me, is also interesting. So, like, I totally understand why anyone would watch this game and be like, man, this sucks. We lost again. They're 2-8. I completely understand it. But I guess from my standpoint, one, I sort of know what this season is. The injuries have just killed this team, and we just saw it with DeJuan Jones again, and it's devastating because it's most likely right. I've seen it described as leg and ankle. Most likely, it's right at the joint. And the second you mention surgery, that is awful because you just don't know what the recovery is going to be like that, which is, puts a huge question mark on that because I think healthy, he can play left tackle, and the Browns can be fine with that. But now, obviously, as we've talked about all along, I think they needed another tackle anyway. They were always going to need another tackle, but it sort of now ups the priority of getting that other tackle. But if DeJuan Jones is able to get through this game healthy and that play doesn't happen, I'm sitting here going, I had a lot of fun watching the Browns offense, and I don't apologize for that. Even as I can also say it is incredibly frustrating that the defense and special teams were as bad as they were. But it was awesome. Jerry Jeudy, 142 yards. David Njoku had the easiest 81 yards I think he's ever had.
Yeah.
Elijah Moore is good, and I wrote about him, and I'm glad he helped me out. That I think they should extend, at least another year of Elijah Moore. Cedric Tillman is good. Like, if you just took those four guys and took everything else out of this, you could build an offense just around those four guys right now. Now, I think they should always want more. I would love to get a true number one to sort of put on top of all of this group of guys and form a really formidable group of five. But like, what I see from the Kevin Stefanski, Ken Dorsey, whatever you want to call this offense in this game is promising and gives me hope for the future, and that this can get turned around quickly for next year.
Yeah, I thought the offensive performance was encouraging in that, you got a career day out of Jerry Jeudy, 6 for 142 and a tutty. Njoku, 9 for 81. Moore, 6 for 66 and a tutty. And Tillman, 3 for 47, but still impressive in those 3 catches. Nick Chubb, 11 carries, 50 yards. To your point, the run game wasn't what it was, but I thought Nick Chubb looked better than he has in any other game so far.
There's the second touchdown drive, the one where they ended with the Moore toe tap. He had 3 runs, went 14, 6, and 8. And that moment, and I agree, I wrote the same thing. You got a glimpse of the old Nick Chubb, 27 yards, 3 carries. That was a little glimpse. It was nice, but like overall in the day, 66 yards on 20 carries, not great.
Yeah. For himself, for Chubb alone, got his average back to 4.55, though, where he's been in the 2s for the past few weeks. Sam Penix, welcome to the show, my friend. Follow Sam at Sam_Penix. Sam, takeaways from today's game offensively, before we get to some of the more negative stuff on the defensive side and the special teams and whatnot. 14 points only, but felt like it should have been more, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, they had the couple of missed field goals, turnover on downs. I think that really killed some momentum there. I have a question for you. You guys remember the last Browns quarterback to throw for 400 yards? I know Winston didn't get there today, but just about.
Did Flacco get there last year?
Nope.
I don't know.
It's probably Derek Anderson.
It is not Derek Anderson. Close. You got to go all the way back to 2015. Josh McCown.
Wow. Of course, it was McCown. Of course, this is because all I want from any quarterback right now, for the sake of development, is the Josh McCown experience, which is right now, Jameis Winston's better than the Josh McCown experience.
Casey. All over
yep. Casey got it. 457 against the Ravens. So, I mean, 395. Like that's a no turnovers. Good game from Winston. It only led to 14 points, but in reality, it wasn't his fault. They missed out a lot more. So, as far as quarterback goes, like, you got to be encouraged. 2 out of the 3 games that Winston has played in, he's been very good. I think he's probably. I mean, I don't see any way that they don't stick with him for the rest of the year, and I think he's definitely putting himself into the discussion for a pretty decently sized contract as a bridge guy next year.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's putting himself in position to do that. I think he needs to stack some more good performances. To your point, a lot of people in the chat say, with this stuff, the 14 points, come on, pathetic. I get it. It is frustrating, but so let's just go through it. So first drive, turnover on downs, right? Punt, touchdown, punt, missed field goal, touchdown, punt, turnover on downs, punt. That's your game. I mean, there wasn't a lot of possessions in this game, first of all. And then secondly, you've got multiple turnover on downs and multiple missed field goals, which ultimately, anytime you end in a drive that isn't ending in a made kick, we'll call it that, right? A made kick or a punt, you're missing out on points. And a lot of these drives, they were moving the ball between the 20s, to Pete's point, right? Like, it was fun to watch them move the ball. But they've got to get it in the end zone more. And, like kind of what he said, what do you say about the kicker at this point? I mean, we can have a big conversation about it, but who really cares, right? It's the kicker. I don't know. He kicked 3 balls that looked exactly the same to me. Yep. And he obviously has a case of the yips or something.
I don't know what the answer is. But like, what am I going to do? Analyze like the kicker? They extended him to a contract extension. They have him at least for this year. They're not going to cut him tomorrow. So I can sit here and beat up on Dustin Hopkins. Chances are he's doing that enough on himself, and teammates may try to do it if they follow the 49ers mindset. Although, to their credit, Deebo Samuel threatening their kicker within an inch of his life seemed to work, because then he made his next one. So that could be an option. But overall, like, there's no question that you're not going to be happy with the 14 points. Like, there's no debating the fact that the Browns lost. But if the Browns are going to lose, would you rather they lose in a situation where the quarterback you have is throwing for 395 yards and looks pretty good for the most part, but certainly not great, pretty good? Would you like your 24-year-old receivers and one 25-year-old receiver to play well? Would you like your tight end coming off the ankle injury to play well? I think the answer to all these questions would certainly be yes. And they did all those things. The offensive line is not good, and it's not going to be good the rest of this year. They're going to have to deal with this in the offseason. If you're upset about the defense, I'm right there with you. It's frustrating to watch the defense make some of these same mistakes. I think Clint Kubiak drew up a good game plan, again, to beat exactly what the Browns do and what they have done. And your pass rush is not getting there, especially in the second half, where they were sending a lot of guys and we're not getting home, only to find wide open receivers. And oftentimes Taysom Hill, who had seemingly about 500 yards total offense, you're going to lose. And that's going to be where you end up. So if you're asking me specifically about the offense, yeah, I'm going to enjoy it, because I haven't been able to enjoy the Browns offense much this season. And I want, so much of this, the Browns are 2-8. They're like, I would love for them to make the playoffs, but it's not going to happen. So at this point, I have to look forward. And what I look forward to is Jerry Jeudy, career high in receiving yards, which he got in the first half, and had an 89-yard touchdown, which showed you all the things you want to see from Jerry Jeudy. Good speed. He got wide open. Great job all day creating separation. Like, these are the things you brought in Jerry Jeudy to do. You're sitting here, the Browns traded for Jerry Jeudy, and they said, we think he's entering the prime years of his career. And right now, if he was just going off like Jameis Winston, he would be on pace to easily get his career high yardage for a season. Unfortunately, he's tied to the first several crap games of Deshaun Watson, and his averages dropped dramatically as a result of that. Cedric Tillman playing really well with Jameis Winston. We are having the same conversations we had when Joe Flacco entered the lineup, and all of a sudden, I was like, David Njoku's great. We can't ever let this guy go. Well, realistically, it's just when you get a decent amount of quarterback play, you can have these other guys really show up. Elijah Moore looks like a player you do not want to see leave Cleveland right this second, which is exactly what we should want. He's got something like 300 yards over the last 3 games or something like that. So these are all things you want to have happen. So as much as I can sit here and go on for an hour on how much the Browns should effectively, commit seppuku as a franchise, it doesn't work that way. They're going to have to get over it and figure out how the best way to go forward. What they have on offense right this second in the passing game is going pretty well. It's extraordinarily similar to what they did last year. Different coaching staff, same results, which is important, because the common denominator in this is any non-Deshaun Watson quarterback that Kevin Stefanski seems to get his hands on plays well. And if you are so much of the conversation for so many people is, why should the Browns keep Kevin Stefanski? That is the first and most important point. Quarterback, he can get him to play.
Yeah. Sam, thoughts on the same topic?
Yeah, I mean, that the sample size is there, right? Like it's any quarterback, like Pete said, that hasn't been Watson has found success. And it doesn't matter whether the offensive coordinator has been Van Pelt or Dorsey. Like it's it's the head coach's responsibility here because he's the one involved with the offense. It's been good to see guys like Judy and Moore become more involved over the past couple of weeks and start to show again, like, yeah, these guys are legitimate NFL players. Like they're talented. As long as they have baseline decent quarterback play, they're going to be producing fairly well. I think I've appreciated how they've been using Moore as less of a pure slot guy. You know, this was kind of the discussion last year was once they realized, oh, this guy's actually a better boundary guy, then he starts playing well. And it was a really nice toe tap catch in the end zone. Like he's that kind of a guy. He can do that. He showed that skill set in college, and anytime he hasn't been pigeonholed into that slot role because of his size in the pros, he's played pretty well. And I think he's definitely turned around public perception on him from early in the season where it was, nah, this guy's done after this season, to now, yeah, there's a legitimate possibility I could see him getting extended, and they run it back with him because he's a talented player. He's young. And I think he's only going to continue to get better, especially as he gains more comfort in the role that he's supposed to be playing and playing with a legitimate NFL quarterback.
I agree. I've been a big fan of Elijah Moore, and it's good to see some of that coming to fruition. I really like today, you know, if you want to try to parse out some of the effects of, you know, as you mentioned, Pete, I wrote about this, of Dorsey. I really like the quick hitter stuff to Njoku. You can't beat that stuff when you're hit. You know, I mean, they're getting him the ball immediately off the line of scrimmage, and it's effective, right? He's getting 7 a pop. I feel like you could do that all day. And then, you know, even the RPO stuff they used today, I liked, even though the one time Njoku was right in front of a wide open Jerry Jeudy, where he probably could have gone for another 20 yards if he doesn't get his hand on it and almost cause an interception. But that stuff is working and was in rhythm with Winston as well. So, you know, I do think that there's a nice mesh right now. They just got to get the ball in the end zone more ultimately and finish drives better. Yeah.
We got a little glimpse of Jamari Thrash with people have been wanting to see. He got his first reception, which looked good. Yes. You know, the things I would criticize, they need to be better in the red zone. And obviously they didn't get a whole lot of chances in this game, but their 2 touchdowns were obviously 30-plus yards each. 30 yards to Elijah Moore on the touchdown, which was great. And I'm never going to turn down an 89-yard touchdown, but they've got to do a better job in the red zone. Further, the Kadarius Toney stuff, I understand why anyone would want to mess with him. He is a lottery ticket in the sense that you got this player that somebody else gave up on, and you're trying to make it work. But the play they ran with him, Cedric Tillman, great block, and then he turns right around and gets tackled by the guy that Tillman blocked. So like that stuff is frustrating and sort of gives you pause. But like this is also sort of a function of where they are in the season of, I don't want to say it's just try stuff because I hate that thought process, as Brad well knows.
Yeah.
But they do need to sort of figure out what some of these guys are going to do, because if they don't, then, you know, it's either send Kadarius Toney packing at the end of this year, which could happen. Obviously a part of this is figuring out if you're going to re-sign Elijah Moore or not. Part of this is then going to be evaluating Jamari Thrash. These are all things that matter. And just sort of figuring out what is worth keeping and what isn't. But yes, the running game piece is a problem. And it's going to be a problem, though. Again, I liked the little spark we saw from Nick Chubb. I liked what I saw from Jerome Ford as a compliment off of Chubb. Yeah. Even though he didn't really have much on the ground, it was the throws game where he was really nice as a backfield option. So all of a sudden, and I saw this sort of bandied about on social media, was that we're starting to see what the Browns were hoping to do for Deshaun Watson with anyone else. 5 different guys are potentially getting the ball. In fact, 7 different receivers had receptions of at least 10 yards in this game. And I think at least 3, if not 4, had explosive plays. Cedric Tillman had 2. I think Jerry Jeudy had 2. Those are the things that you want to see with this offense. But clearly there are things that aren't going to be fixed this year that are a real problem. But you have to work with what you have, and the Browns are getting more out of it. Now, it helps that they're playing the Saints. I don't think the Saints are a very good football team, though their defense has typically been a pretty decent pass defense. So maybe that's encouraging. It's going to obviously be difficult to carry this over when you've got to play the Steelers twice and some of these, the Ravens again, some of these other teams as you go down the stretch, the Chiefs eventually. But you need to get something going, and at least that part coming out of the bye week gives you hope that that can happen. The other side of the ball and the special teams element, those are problems. And you have to get those things fixed quickly because I don't think the Browns are going to go 2-15, but they need to get things better on those areas of the game if they do intend on winning football games.
You're watching the OBR post-game show. Browns lose to the Saints 35-14 in New Orleans. Make sure you hit like and subscribe as we went over 5,000 subscribers today, and we can't do that without you. So we appreciate your guys' participation in the chat. Guys, defensively, super frustrating in the first half. Screens all over the place, misdirection. As Pete kind of alluded to, Clint Kubiak had it dialed up to use Taysom Hill in every way possible and use the misdirection and screens to exploit the Browns defense. Are they, let me ask you that. Here's my question, and maybe I'm just being dumb here. Why did it take so long? Or why are they such a slave to man-to-man in a situation like this? It felt like they were getting killed in man-to-man in the first half. And they continued to try to run man, and it felt like they continued to get beat in man. Is that just the same old adage with Schwartz where that's just kind of what he does and he's going to stick with it until I know eventually they adjusted and they went to some zone later on, but they were getting carved up in the first half. Through the pass game, the run game, there wasn't really much they could do. And to your point, Pete, they couldn't really get any pressure on the quarterback either, which made it all the more difficult. Where do you start with the defense here?
Well, the reason I would play man-to-man is because they don't have Chris Olave and they don't have much else. Like you would like to think that you've got a commanding advantage to be able to man them up and be able to say, hey, we can beat you one-on-one. The fact of the matter is that the Chiefs did a good job with some of the mesh stuff they use. They also did a good job with screen game and some of those things that took advantage of the man stuff. I mean, some of that is reputation undoubtedly. The other part is that, and we saw this on the one long touchdown, the Browns got beaten combo coverage. And this is, I know, like on some level, it's probably going to end up being a communication issue because it always is. But like they caught him in half, running coverage half and half man, half zone. And for whatever reason, it didn't get communicated or whatever. Somebody didn't pick up the right guy and they obviously give it the touchdown. But if you're the defensive coordinator and you keep having these things happen, you're going to stop running zone because you can't trust your guys to execute it. So you can either die slowly or die really fast. And given the two options, at least from a football standpoint, Jim Schwartz would rather die slowly and try to get his defense to make plays. And I think that's part of why you saw them just sort of unleash the guys on the pass rush and try to blitz them so much in the second half, was to try to cause some issues from there. I mean, they did get the 2 turnovers. One was a gift from Taysom Hill, and the other was just ripping out the fumble. But if not for those things, I think this game would have been even worse.
Yeah, Sam. They couldn't get to the quarterback effectively, really, and I guess what I'm kind of pointing to is like Taysom Hill running out in man-to-man and getting wide open on an in cut or an out cut, right? Like, and it felt like there was a lot of that. And then the screen game was certainly detrimental.
Yep. I mean, like Pete said, their receivers were all out today. So like if Marquez Valdez-Scantling is your wide receiver 1, you would expect to be able to play man effectively with how expensive and hyped up the secondary is, and that just didn't happen. And even when they went to zone, like I don't know what it is, if it's purely a communication thing, but the secondary just is not a good zone team. I know they had like a 2 or 3 week period earlier in the season where it was like, okay, they're doing this a little bit more and they're getting a little bit better at it. But overall, like there's just like these gigantic gaps, and I don't know if it's multiple guys not understanding what their assignment is on a given play or a single guy blowing his assignment, but that's not where the strength of this team lies. And I feel like I think I wrote about this a couple weeks ago. It seems like the aggressiveness factor with this defense, where they love the turnovers, they love making the stops behind the line of scrimmage, they love the passes defended. It seems like the way that this team is coached, especially the celebration, everything, whole nother story, but like the way that they're coached to where Schwartz focuses on those big plays lends itself a lot more to man, where it seems like the players are more interested playing man because they have more of a chance to make those plays rather than just sitting back in zone, being patient, kind of allowing the offense to do what they want to do and then stopping the bleeding at that point. It just seems like they're more skilled, more adept at playing man. But then you have a game like today where it's like, this should be the time where it's like, okay, the Saints shouldn't have been able to move the ball in the passing game when you're playing man, but it didn't matter who it was. Valdez Scantling, Hill, Moreau, like Juwan Johnson. These guys aren't the kinds of players who are consistently week to week stacking 50, 60, 70-yard games, but they did today because the Browns just couldn't stop them for whatever reason.
Not having JOK is also not helpful. I mean, I do think that part of the problem is they have linebackers who are geared to go downhill and don't really do well at doing anything else. And I include Jordan Hicks in that, who I think is a very good player. I just don't think that's his game. Devin Bush, I don't think can do it. And I really like Diabate. I think he's going to be a good player. He did not play well in this game, and I don't think that's necessarily his strength either.
Mm-hmm. I think the pass rush issue is another thing. I mean, I know Zadarius Smith had half a sack today, so like good, cool, but it was in the team's best interest to move on from him, I think, just considering where they were in the season, right? The Myles Garrett thing, like he's hampered. He is not anywhere close to 100%, and still he's the one that teams are game planning for, because even at 50-60% of his full strength, he's still a terrific player. I think he's now at 6 consecutive games where he's had a PFF pass rush grade below 80, which I don't think that's ever happened before in his career. The last time he went more than like 2 or 3 games was like 2020 season, where he was also dealing with some injuries. Like he's a shell of himself right now. And I think that the defense as a whole has gotten so used to just relying on how destructive he is. Even with the amount of investment that they've put in the defensive line, like there's some good players on the other side of the edge, defensive tackle room, but none of them are anywhere close to being on the level of Garrett. And I think you're seeing what happens when the way that a defense is constructed and the way that the scheme is run doesn't have the whole linchpin of that scheme. And you end up with a situation today where 35 points to the Saints, lacking all of their top receivers. They had some injuries on the offensive line. It shouldn't have happened, but it did. And unfortunately, that's becoming kind of the norm with this defense right now, not even going into the whole effort and tackling issues.
He is a franchise level quarterback player, and he has not been himself this year, and he wasn't himself in 2022. And that season ended with Joe Woods being fired, and the defense wasn't good. After 2021, where Myles Garrett probably should have been Defensive Player of the Year and didn't get it because the team's record was so bad. But he and Denzel Ward were so good in 2021 that it made the Browns defense like middle of the pack with very little talent on it. This year, it's the same. You're running into the same problem. Myles Garrett is that good, and you have a lot of talent on this team. Like I will argue, with Isaiah McGuire, with Martin Emerson down year, whatever, he's still a good player. Denzel Ward's still a good player. Greg Newsom's still a fine player. Grant Delpit's a very good player. There's a lot of very good players on this team, but he is that good where, that's part of the reason where you sit there and you go, if presuming his foot surgery stuff that he's going to get after the offseason will get him to full strength, I have no reason to believe it will not, that they will be back in a much bigger way next year, where you can sit here and along with a whole host of other injuries, which has become comical at this point. They have one game the entire year where the 5 guys made it through the entire game on the offensive line. The one they beat the Ravens. That is where you end up with this season between Deshaun Watson, who's one of the injuries now, and everything else. That as much as people want to throw out the front office and everybody else, and I'm happy to listen to the argument. If you say for Deshaun Watson, you have to pay for this, but I don't believe Jimmy Haslam is going to make them do that. Like for that. So if you are then to the other point, you are basically saying they should be fired because of human fragility at this point, because like it is not realistic to really sort of measure this team based on what they have left. Unfortunately, Mike Hall, an injury in practice. I don't know how long he's going to be out. It wouldn't surprise me if it's the rest of the season. They missed him today because of what he can do on the interior and what he's been able to do the past few games he was playing. Not having JOK and then, no answers on that one. One of your most impactful players, DeJuan Jones, is just the latest injury on the offensive line. And this is like the healthiest the offense has been. And it's just so dispiriting for this team to continually deal with this. They were able to get miracles last year. And again, no small part because Myles Garrett was Defensive Player of the Year. He was that good. Yeah. And not having him to that level changes this team so much. And then you come back to the other part of that, where we talk about how bad special teams were. Dustin Hopkins had the best kicking season in team history last year, and now he can't kick to save his life this year. So these are all reasons that you end up in the situation you're in, which doesn't make it any like less disappointing to be 2-8, but it sort of helps you understand how you can get to this point so quickly.
Absolutely. You're watching the OBR post-game show brought to you by Core Home Fitness, known for their adjustable dumbbells, top rated by the New York Times and Men's Health. They are also rated a Best Buy by Consumer Reports. Go to corehomefitness.com and check out their assortment of lifting equipment. They have benches, bars, all the equipment you need to set up Core Home Fitness, little setup there like this guy does in his home, so he can get see those gains, get built, get into shape in your home. Go check out the website, bring the gym home, check out their videos and other products like the Glute Drive Plus, Fight Master, and Crush Your Goals in 2024, soon to be 2025. They've got a U.S.-based support team, fast shipping, hassle-free returns, you name it. They know what they're doing. Again, check out corehomefitness.com for the ultimate in-home fitness equipment. They are very kind to have supported the OBR and sponsor this show. Get in the gym, make yourself better with Core Home Fitness. And thanks again to them. All right, guys, so let's talk about DeJuan Jones real quick. So this injury, I mean, the Browns can't have anything nice, right? They just can't. We've been talking about the opportunity cost of him playing left tackle, and it looks like you might have your future left tackle there, even though they kind of stumbled into it with Jed Will's nonsense and all that, right? But either way, he gets rolled up on today. It sounds like a broken something, right? Pete, you said with the air cast and everything. And then they said he will have season-ending surgery after the game. So there are concerns with this when it's a man this size. And we look at the rehab process that it took our tackles in general all of offseason into the season with DeJuan, Conklin, and Wills this year. So this is brutal, guys. This is brutal stuff. Where do we come out on this? Do we know anything about the recovery time for something like this? Is it going to be shorter than the knee issue? And what are your thoughts? How do you now, where in 1 second I was thinking, okay, that's one thing off their off-season to-do list. How do you approach left tackle now this offseason?
To me, it doesn't change. You needed a tackle regardless. You were either going to have to get a tackle to compete for left tackle, or at the very least be somebody who could provide depth and potentially eventually replace Jack Conklin. Now you have to approach it as if you are getting a guy who can start now. And then beyond that, if DeJuan Jones comes back, great. If he doesn't, you have to have somebody who can step in and play. Ankle surgery, I've seen it described as ankle and leg. I assume it's something down at the base of his leg. And once you have surgery on that, the recovery time is more difficult. It's also not as surefire. So there's a little bit more question with that. It was the same when they lost Luke Whippler to the broken ankle in the preseason. The Browns were excited about Luke Whippler, but once you get into season-ending ankle surgery, which is what he had in the preseason, and I can't say that necessarily assume that these are the same surgery because we don't know the nature of it, and I'm not a doctor, but it's probably going to take him a while. Now, will it take as long as last year? I have no idea. It may take less time, but the issue is going to be whether or not it's going to respond the same way, and that's a little bit more of a roll of the dice. I don't know how much of that's going to come down to just luck, how much of that's going to come down to hard work or anything else. I imagine Brad, you'll probably talk to a real doctor about that part, but you have to approach it like you are now getting somebody who can come in and start. Now, the only thing I can say that is sort of slightly, I guess, less concerning is that you don't need superstar tackles. You don't. I think guard, in terms of getting better play, I think guard is more important than tackle, but you need tackle play that can survive. I mean, realistically, Jermaine Ifedi is not a good tackle, but for the most part, he was okay in this game. I'm not suggesting Jermaine Ifedi is a solution. He is not, but that is to say that if you can find somebody who can hold up and do the job at a decent rate, you can get by. That's going to be a challenge for them. They're going to have to do it, figure that out. Somebody who can come in and be ready to go, unfortunately, with this injury.
As you approach the offseason, Pete, you're assuming Conklin is your right tackle next season to start this year?
I would, because he's played great. Now, the whole thing is just, as with all these guys, please keep 300-pound bodies from landing on them. That has been a huge factor in these guys staying healthy. That is obviously what got Jack in his knee. That is what got DeJuan Jones today. That is what got Luke Whippler. Like, that is so much of just being lucky and not having bodies roll into joints. But in terms of Jack Conklin doing the job, he's right now their best lineman by far. So that stabilizes the position. But again, even before the DeJuan issue, I was going to get somebody to come in and make sure I had depth to cover both of them, because both of them gotten hurt, and get somebody who can eventually replace, potentially at least give you somebody who has a shot of replacing Jack Conklin eventually.
Yeah. Sam, as you look at the tackles, Conklin, I think he's out of guaranteed money, so that's probably looking at like some sort of a restructure going into next year if they want to keep him around, which they obviously probably do at this point with the level of play that he's providing, and where you're at with your tackles. But you're going to need another one, right? And you're going to need one that can eventually start for you. Is that where you're at too?
I get the argument, about age and durability and money with Conklin, but this team is in no way, shape, or form in a position to get rid of a quality tackle. Like, as Pete said, he's been their best lineman this year, and it hasn't. I don't even think it's really been close. Since he's come back, like, he has solidified that right tackle position, and I think that's helped the offense as a whole. Obviously, you see that fixing one spot when there's 2, 3, 4 other problem areas, depending on the snap, doesn't do a whole lot for you, but it does help. So I would enter next season wanting to keep Conklin around, wanting him to be the starter at right tackle. Hoping that DeWan can come back, make a strong recovery, and then compete for that starting left tackle spot. But I can't go into that with the assumption that happens. Even if he didn't get hurt today, like he still has to show like he can provide consistent play at that position. More like today as opposed to the past 2 weeks of play there.
Yeah.
He's not a proven commodity at this point. So I don't think you can kind of make the assumption that he's going to be solid for you, but he definitely factors into your plans moving forward because he's a big talented guy who he's put good play on the field. There's just not enough of it consistently at this point. But I think you definitely move forward with him, hoping that he can do that, hoping he can make a strong recovery. I think you got to draft a tackle pretty highly. I know it's not considered a great tackle class, which is unfortunate, but I think you got to find a guy regardless. And then I think you have to sign at least one veteran who you can throw on either side in the case of injury or if he wins out on the left side and provide you some decent play. Perhaps Adeniji comes back as one of your end of the roster depth guys because he looked really good in the preseason relative to the other tackles that they had at that point. So he's a possibility there. There are going to be prospects who are going to have talent. It's just there's a lot of these guys, unfortunately, in this class who seem like they're going to be guards at the next level. Which then again, you're probably going to need a guard here pretty soon. You might need another one shortly thereafter. So that becomes another discussion to be had. Maybe you just think somebody like Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks is just a really good lineman, and then you say, "Hey, we'll experiment with you, see if you can survive at tackle, and if not, bump them into guard, and you've got a good guard." So I think something like that is probably going to be their best option. I don't see them making a big splash in free agency like they did for Conklin a couple years ago. I just don't think they're in that position as a franchise right now. So I think that's where they're going to go.
Yeah, they've sunk so much money into the offensive line for so long, Sam and Pete. You know, and we talked about this. You kind of, as these guys depart, you know, Batonia retires and whatever happens to the rest of the offensive line, you want it to get younger, right, and cheaper, at least for a certain amount of time. Certainly you don't want, you know, Wyatt Teller is at times a part of what you're doing, although his play has been somewhat shaky. But you know, in Conklin, you just can't get rid of him at this point because he's playing too well. And he's been healthy since he's came back. So, you know, it's just, you know, you mentioned Pete guard being such a big part of this, and I think that goes to the run game, right? Like just your ability to not be able to run the ball. You have to. This offense is going to have to be able to run the football next season to be effective in any way, and that's going to have to come with some reinforcements on this offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, the run game certainly isn't a big part of that, but just the amount of quarterbacks who just cannot stand pressure in front of them right by their feet, giving up that ground and what that causes the quarterback to do. I mean, the amount of premium defensive tackles that are entering the league, the amount of elite athletes. I mean, that's why the Browns drafted Mike Hall. That's why, you know, you see some of these teams trying to get these guys. Keanu Benton with the Steelers, the Metabuike, the Ravens just extended. The Bengals had made signings in the offseason, all to address this position. There is a vulnerability for teams. And right now, this is the thing that is killing the Bengals. They are not great on the interior, specifically Cordell Volson, their left guard. And it is hurting them quite a bit in getting those quick pressures and causing pressure on Joe Burrow. So guard play is just super important. But just in terms of what the Browns do offensively, you know, if you were just running zone, guard isn't as big of a deal. But for the amount of pulling the Browns want to do, the amount of like pin and pull, guards coming around, kicking out, all that stuff. You have to have those guys to do it. And then, yes, you have to be able to turn around and be effective in pass protection. And you go, obviously we're talking about Ken Dorsey's, and Kevin Stefanski's new variation on the offense and what they're trying to do, which has more of these gap concepts. But go back to 2020 when the Browns were, outstanding. First team All-Pro in Joe Bitonio, second team All-Pro in Wyatt Teller, and then they had a first team All-Pro right tackle in Jack Conklin. But like it has been the guards, and that the Browns have shown the money to that position. They clearly value it more than tackle. And a lot of this is a lot of teams. I mean, this is what I think the Saints were one of the teams that started with this when they did with Drew Brees, and part of this because it was a short quarterback. The Browns did with Baker Mayfield, but just in terms of what it does offensively, and you saw it in this game. Jameis Winston's was compared to the last time the Browns played. Jameis Winston kept looking down at his feet 2 weeks ago and looked just uncomfortable, moving all over the place. And today he felt way more comfortable. They were far better up the middle, and he was able to get the ball out and do his thing. And there are a lot of quarterbacks who feel the same way. I know Deshaun Watson was a guy who complained about that, but like that's the thing. The Browns want to be able to cause as much disruption there as possible. They want to protect from as much disruption as there as possible.
Question from the chat real quick. Does Zinter have a possible future playing on the left side, or is he strictly a right guard?
To be determined. I mean, most of experiences at left guard. He played exclusively there at Michigan, except in the spring game where he played center, I guess. But the Browns did put Zinter in at left guard in multiple preseason games. The last two preseason games, they had both Zinter and Javion Cohen in there. Zinter on the right, Cohen on the left, and then they'd flip them and had them both in there. And then they put, I think at one point they had Zinter on the left and Wyatt Davis, who's no longer here, thankfully, on the right, who sucked. And so they got him some experience there. I don't think they've gotten certain with that, but just the nature of what Zinter has to do, he's got to learn both. Unless Joe Bitonio decides tomorrow, hey, I'm retiring, and then he's got a sort of a clear direction. Until that happens, I think they're going to get him to look at both. I do think there are some important distinctions between a left guard and a right guard for what the Browns want to do. I think Zinter is probably more suited to be a right guard, so I'm more inclined to look at left. But I think the Browns are going to at least get the long look to see if Zinter can do both.
Yeah. Speaking of positions that they will need to address real quickly, am I crazy to think that center is not one at this point?
If not for the injury today, I'd say center was the first one. Ethan Postgame would save the Browns about $6 million if they let him go after this season. It's sort of how the contract was always structured to go. It's not necessarily easy to do that, but I think if you can get a guy in free agency, that is the position I'd want to target first. I'd probably also potentially target a guard if Bitonio were to retire. But yeah, center's the thing that I think in free agency would be one of the things I absolutely want to see the Browns address. I think Ethan Postgame has, I don't want to say he's regressed entirely back to the form he showed, which is why Seattle let him go after his rookie contract, but he's also not playing nearly as well as what he did when the Browns got him originally. He's been dealing with a knee issue. I don't know what the status of that is, but like 4th and 1, today you see him get driven back, and it was uncomfortably bad how effectively he was driven back. I thought he was better in pass protection in this game, but still, I just don't think he's giving you enough right now. And some of that's, I think if he was being flanked by better guard play, it would help. But they had Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller back healthier, and I still didn't see a huge difference. So that is a huge concern for me.
He was pushed directly into Nick Chubb on the 4th down play to start it. All right, last thing I want to talk about before we get out of here tonight, guys, is special teams real quickly, and not so much the kicker, but once again, the return game is awful, right? Is basically they got returned another kick for a touchdown if he doesn't step out of bounds. There was another long return from Taysom Hill that set him up. Hill is an athlete, no doubt, but he doesn't have blazing speed by any stretch of the imagination, yet he's running down the field on one of these returns. Sam, I saw you in the Slack mention effort today. Where did you have an issue with effort most? Was it defensively? Was it in the special teams? Where do you think that? Do you think that there is an issue with this locker room, or Kevin at risk of losing this locker room?
I don't know that I could say there's an issue in the locker room. I can only speak to, what they put on tape. And I would say that the majority of the effort issues I saw were on defense late in the game. There may have been some things on special teams as well, but just guys not caring to try to wrap up. I think on the Taysom Hill rushing touchdown right up the middle on 4th and 1, Grant Delpit just flies in with his, tries to shoulder check him and bounces him out of a tackle, and then he just takes it all the way. Other guys on the, the 75-yard rushing touchdown for Hill,
Yeah.
like you said, he's not blazing fast, and there's no one even in the same area code. And I get that schematically everyone is on the other side of the field, but the corners and the safety should be able to catch up to him, and they just didn't care to even try. I think Okoronkwo ended up being the guy furthest down the field closest to Hill by the time he was in the end zone. Shouldn't happen. I get the game is over at that point, but it's not a good look overall. And that's just where we are at this point in the season, right? The season has been over for weeks at this point. I think everyone is just really fed up and disappointed. Fan base, organization, locker room. This was not anywhere close to what it should have been or what it was supposed to be, what it was expected to be. So I think things are just coming to a head, and it's just going to keep continuing this way, I think, unfortunately, for the rest of the year, because this was their chance to get a win here. This was their best shot at a win. They're going to be playing some really good teams coming up over the next few weeks, teams who are in the thick of playoff races with the other elites in the NFL. So there's seeding implications and everything. So they're not going to roll over and let the Browns just walk in and get a free win. So the effort has to be vastly improved, I think, if they're going to have a chance to win.
Pete, questions on effort today for you?
Well, look, the touchdown to Taysom Hill, I put on Mahmoud Diabate. He wasn't where he's supposed to be, and gave up contain there, and that's sort of how that play happens. And then guys just get exasperated. As far as shoulder checking and all that stuff, I'm literally watching Josh Allen run through a whole bunch of Chiefs doing the same thing. Unfortunately, it is a plague in the NFL how bad tackling is. Very few teams do it well, and you see a lot of this. And certainly you can look at this and question effort in terms of individual plays. I see it all the time in terms of, what people want to see. And I'm not disagreeing with anything Sam said on this. I think at some point guys just get so exasperated. They're just, they're to a point where it gets ugly. And ultimately, but if you're asking me, do I think they've lost a lot? Do I think a locker room has lost these guys? No, absolutely not, because they clearly play hard when they have the opportunity, and they got beat. And that's unfortunately how it goes. And then you get beat, and suddenly the floodgates open up, as happened on that last play, and you're just sort of fed up at that point. But am I sitting here watching for 4 quarters going, man, this team doesn't want to be here? No, because I can cite all the players, young guys leading the way realistically, as guys who are trying to get better, because ultimately, basically Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward are about the 2 guys who can afford to do this. And Myles Garrett could shut it down anytime now and say, I'm ready to get my surgery, and no one would blink. Or Denzel Ward, there are any number of people trying to retire him. So the rest of these guys, they are, poor effort and not give a damn away from being out of the league. So you are sort of forced to give effort, because if the Browns evaluate you, and let's use Jed Wills as an example. I know what the Browns said, but I don't think Jed Wills is going to be back. I
Yeah.
don't see him getting a contract. I don't think Jed Wells is long for the league because of whatever has driven him to play football seems to be gone from him, and maybe he will get it back. And I certainly understand why an extended period of time of being injured and dealing with the same injury would just be awful for you mentally and physically. But like, unfortunately, this is the business we have chosen, and that is what you're expected to do. And that is the gladiatorial nature of the sport. They will spit you out and move on to the next one. I mean, that is just how it goes. So whenever you don't win, it's easy to go, well, that guy's not trying, and that guy's not giving enough of an effort. We are very good at policing body language. I see people criticize people for not trying hard enough, and again, not disagreeing with anything Sam said. I also see people mad at Grant Delpit for celebrating a play he made, even as he's being. Thankfully, he had the mask on; otherwise, his eyes would have been raked out. So it's one of those things where the bottom line is losing sucks. There's no good way to do it. So you want guys to try as hard as they can, but ultimately nobody's going to be satisfied until they win. And right now they're not winning, and there's no reason to believe they're going to start. They're not going to end up 9-8. I'm fairly confident in saying that. So the rest of this is, what do you do in the meantime? And again, I saw a team. I watched a team that believed they could win this game until they couldn't. And that's unfortunately how it goes.
The Godfather.
Yeah, I mean, this is the business we have chosen. That's ultimately what it is.
The life we have chosen, Chris. Thank you so well. All right, guys, that's a good way to get out of here. Browns drop a tough one. It was 14-14. In the blink of an eye, they dropped 21 points to the Saints and lose going away in the fourth quarter. It was a much closer game than that, than ultimately what the scoreboard said, as it got away from them on a couple plays in the fourth quarter. Yes, Joe Woods beat us. I realized that. Joe
Woods has never been a bad defensive coordinator. The thing that drives me nuts with this is people are still complaining about the things they complained about when Joe Woods was here. The defensive coordinator has changed. The results have not. What is the problem? I wonder. I can't figure it out. What's the common denominator here? You can, and this is what a lot of people are still going to suggest. Let's fire our way out of this. Well, that's not really the issue. If the theme remains, even multiple coordinators, then maybe the theme is the problem, and you've got to figure that out. And some of this is just ultimately all of this is solved by doing one thing better. Just play better. That's it. And we can talk about all the stuff coaches do and how easy it would be to fire, Bubba Ventrone, for example, this week, again, will be another focus. And who knows, maybe that Kevin Stefanski will make that call at the end of the season. But so much of this, just play better or figure out guys that fit. That if you are limited by your scheme by guys that you have on this roster, then maybe they shouldn't be on this roster.
Good points all around. We're going to get out of here. Thank you guys for watching the OBR post-game show presented by Core Home Fitness. Once again, go to corehomefitness.com and check it out. Make sure you keep it locked at the OBR.com all week long, as we will have content out covering this game and getting you ready for the quick turnaround for Thursday night football at home against the Steelers. No time to lick your wounds. They got to turn it around and get ready for Thursday night right away. So, as will we over at the OBR. Make sure you hit like and subscribe on your way out, as we have crossed the 5,000 threshold on subscribers. So thank you so much for participating and joining us here on the post-game show. We'll see you all week. We'll have shows every night leading you up to the game and through to the weekend. So we appreciate it. For Pete Smith and Sam Penix, Ian McBride behind the virtual glass, my name is Brad Ward. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful Sunday evening.